What we're going to be talking about is making that transition from working in a 2D world, which most Caltrans users have historically been doing, to working in a 3D world. And this is going to start by how do we create a 3D file. So from the work page, I'm going to click on New File. First thing you do when you create a new file is you tell it where you want to put it. You tell it the name of the file, and we're just going to call ours 3D Demo. And then most importantly is you choose a seed file. This is what you've done historically in the 2D world. I'm going to click Browse. And this is going to bring up the list of choices that Headquarters has provided us for creating new files. The first group of files, 1 through 6, is what you've historically chosen from because these are all 2D. You can see the file names start with 2D. They're zones 1 through 6. The second group of files all start with 3D. Those are the ones we're going to be looking at now. Just like you did for 2D, you would need to know which geographic coordinate system or which zone are you going to be working in 3D. You would choose the appropriate seed file. In this case, I'm going to be working in zone 2. So that's the seed file I'm going to choose. 3D, because it's a three-dimensional file. E for English. Seed, because it's a seed file. And then zone 2. With that selected, I click Open. It's now selected down below. I have a folder, I have a file name, I have a seed file. I'm going to click Save. Now once the file is opened, there are several ways you can tell, am I in a 2D file or a 3D file? And if I look at the title bar up at the top, at the end of the path, just past the file name, it tells you in brackets that you're in a 3D file. There are other ways to tell also. If I go to my workflow, which is in the upper left, if I click on Drawing, you're going to see modeling and visualization. Those will only appear if you're in a 3D file. So I'm going to leave this set to drawing. There's other telltale signs if you're working in a 3D file. If you look at your AccuDraw window down at the bottom, AccuDraw in a 2D file would only display X and Y, but if you're in a 3D file, you'll also see the Z value. Other little things in the interface, for example, if I do a Shift right click, what I'm going to see are 3D options here. These don't appear when I'm in a 2D file. So that's creating a 3D file. Next thing we're going to look at is if I'm in a 3D file, can I reference a 2D file? So if I'm doing work in a 3D file and I want to reference a coordinate correct layout sheet, can I do that? That's what we're going to look at next. So I'm going to go to File, Open. I've got a 3D file already set up here. This is my storm drain network. If I rotate my view around, you can see it's a three-dimensional file. I'm going to zoom out a bit so we can see when I attach the layout sheet, we're going to be able to see it clearly. So I'm going to go to my reference file dialog box. I'm going to go to Attach Reference, just like normal. I've done this before. Microstation always remembers the last file you attached, so it's a 2D file there. I can also tell in the preview window on the right, it tells me that it's a 2D file. So with interactive as the attachment method selected, I'm going to click Open. And on the Reference Attachment Properties dialog, coincident world, just like you would normally, we're still working in coordinate correct geometry, but that is already selected. I'm just going to click OK. And you now see the 2D reference file appear. Move this over to the side. If I rotate my view around, what you can clearly see is up above is my 3D design, and down below is my 2D layout sheet. As I move this around, you can see. Next thing we're going to look at is I hover my cursor over the border for the 2D file, you notice that it highlights the whole thing. Now this can make it distracting to work in a 3D file when you move your cursor over it and it highlights. So we're going to look at several ways that we can turn that off. So the first way we're going to look at it is changing our display style. Now I'm going to zoom in on my 3D project here. Currently, my view is set up to be illustration. That means shaded. There are ways that you can change your display style quickly by doing Shift right click. And again, if you're in a 3D file, you're going to have 3 choices on the right. Now, these are just 3 choices out of many possible choices. So these are quick settings for us. So right now, I have it set to the top one. If I choose the bottom one, which is wireframe. As I zoom out, you're going to notice that everything is wireframe, and if I go to element selection, if I move my cursor over the border, it's not highlighting the whole thing. Now that may be fine for you, but if I zoom back into my 3D project, seeing your design in wireframe, sometimes it's helpful, other times it's not. In this case, we don't want to see this in wireframe. So I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to set this to presentation illustration again. So I'm going to go and use my shortcut here. So we're back to, if I highlight the border, it shows in magenta. I want to be able to make the reference file wireframe, but leave my active files view set to illustration. And the way we do that is from the reference file dialog box, select the reference file. You're going to go to set reference presentation. The display style option is set to be from parent. From parent means your active file. My active file right now is illustration. That's the shaded mode. There's our problem. I'm going to change this from parent, scroll to the very bottom, and I'm going to choose wireframe, and I'm going to click OK. And when I do that, you're going to notice a change, but you're also going to notice when I hover over the border, it doesn't highlight the interior part. And if I zoom back in on my design, I'm still in illustration, which again is a choice you'll need to make, which one is best for what you're doing. You'll find that you're going to switch back and forth between them as you're doing your design. So that's one way to correct that. Let's go ahead and set this back. So I'm going to go ahead and choose set presentation. I'm going to set this back to illustration. So we're back to where we were before. Another way to deal with this is to turn the levels off for the border. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to go to my level display. I'm going to select my reference file. And the levels that start with border all deal with the border. So I'm just going to turn them all off. And by doing that, I no longer will have to worry about highlighting the border and having it show up in magenta and be distracting. So I'm going to close that. So that's another way for you to deal with that. Now, the last thing we're going to look at here is the elements in my file, my three-dimensional design. If I snap to one of these corners, just doing a tentative, I'm going to see in my AccuDraw window that the elevation or Z value is 113.6. I also see in the message center the Z value down there too. Hit reset. If I go out, if I do a tentative to the elements in the layout sheet, any one of them, doesn't matter. If I do a tentative, what you're going to see is they're all at 0 elevation. It shows up in AccuDraw, and it also shows up in my message center where I snapped. What I'd like to do is bring the reference file up in elevation so that it is at a given height, and we're going to make it 113.6. So how do we go about doing that? From our reference file dialog box, we select the reference file. It's already selected. I go to Move Reference. Now, I can pick any point to move it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this point here because they're all the same. And what you're going to see on my screen is the AccuDraw compass. Now, the AccuDraw compass, which we'll discuss in additional videos, has different orientations relative to my 3D design. Right now, the compass is flat to my screen. The red tick mark is AccuDraw's positive x-axis, and the green tick mark is the AccuDraw's positive y-axis. Right now it's flat to my screen. If I hit the letter T, T for top, it will rotate to the design file's true north or top, so that's flat. If I hit F, F for front, you see the change in the orientation, and if I hit S for side, it rotates to the side. What I want to do is rotate it so that I can move it up and down because I want to go straight up. So with it rotated to F or S, either one of those two, it would be fine. Now I'm going to move it up, and I want to move it up 113.6. So AccuDraw, ready for me to type it in right down at the bottom. I just type in 113.6, and without moving it left or right, I data and then reset. And then you can see, I'll go ahead and unselect my reference file. If I zoom in over here, and I rotate my view, you can see my layout sheet is now at that same elevation as the top of the DI. So that's a way for you to go ahead and move the reference file to a different elevation. You could move it horizontally if you needed to, but it probably shouldn't be because it should be horizontally correct coordinate-wise. It's just the Z elevation that needs to be adjusted. So that's attaching a 2D layout sheet to my 3D file. Next thing I'm going to talk about is, once I've got my 3D design done, can I attach my 3D file to a 2D file? That's what we're going to look at next. So I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to open up my 2D file. So here's that 2D file that I just referenced in. And we can confirm that we're in a two-dimensional file. I can see up in the title bar, I can see it says 2D. If I look at my AccuDraw window, I see X and Y, no Z value. And if I look at my workflow in the top left, you're going to see there's no modeling or visualization because I'm in a two-dimensional file. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the 3D file to the 2D file. Now to see this, I'm going to zoom in where our DIs are on our layout sheet so that when we attach the 3D file, we'll be able to see it clearly appear. We're going to go to our reference dialog box. We're going to select Attach Reference. The file that I want to attach is that 3D file that we were just in a moment ago. Click Open. Again, it is a coordinate correct file, horizontally and vertically, so we're going to just leave it set to coincident world. We'll click OK, and you can see it appear on the left-hand side. Now, if I zoom in, you're going to notice that because it's a 3D file, it has, for the 3D objects, it has rule lines, and that's what you see here. Well, that's not helping us. We'd like to see this in more of a, what we call a hidden line view. So how do we change that? Again, it's a reference file, so we can go to our reference file dialog box, select the reference file. We're going to go to Set Reference Presentation. Again, we're going to change this. Instead of it going from the parent, which is wireframe, we're going to go to Hidden Line Realistic, clicking OK, and now you see it displayed. Now, if I hover over it, you're going to be able to see the ID and the OD of the pipe. So that's a way for us to bring our 3D model into our 2D file. So hopefully this is going to help you make that transition from living in a 2D world to working in a 3D world. So stay tuned for a lot more videos regarding 3D and parametric cells.